Welcome back everyone. This is Akshay and in this video we're going to talk about what are various inventory costs and planning strategies. Now let's talk more about different inventory costs. I have created two separate groups. The one on the left I like to call the core costs and on the right are the costs which are a grouping or summation of some different types of costs. So as we go along you will have more idea or clarity into what these all mean. Let's start our discussion with what exactly is the ordering cost. The ordering cost itself is just the cost that you'll incur if you were to order certain items. Now, ordering cost includes costs related to clerical work of preparing, releasing, monitoring, and receiving orders. Sometimes it also includes the physical handling of goods, but it depends on how a company defines the ordering costs. One key thing to note about the ordering costs is that the cost does not vary due to the quantities ordered, but it varies based on the number of orders placed. So if you were to place 10 orders, it would cost you more. If you were to place one order, it would cost you less. Let's take a simple example. If you have to order 100 quantities and if you place one order, you would still be charged for just one order. So that is how the ordering cost work. It depends on the number of orders, not on the quantity. However, if you were to put 10 different orders for quantity 10 each so that you get the overall 100 quantity for the item, you would be charged for 10 orders. So the ordering cost depends on the number of orders, not on the quantity of the item placed in an order. I hope that gives you certain clarification on ordering cost. Now let's take the next component, which is acquisition cost. So acquisition cost is also referred to as product or purchase cost sometimes. What it simply means is the amount you would be charged to buy a certain item. And it is simply calculated as the price per item into the quantity ordered. So that's the acquisition cost. It's probably the most simple among all the costs that are included here. So it's just the money you pay to get the item. Now let's talk about transportation cost. It simply is the money you pay to transport items from one point to another. Now, this point could be from supplier to manufacturer or manufacturer to the warehouse or from warehouse to distributor and from distributor to customer. It depends. Now, for the sake of simplicity, let's just assume the transportation mode is road, that we are transporting it by truck. It could be air, it could be sea, or it could be pipeline or anything. Now, what are the components of transportation involved when you transfer an item by truck? So simply put, you would have to have a number of trucks, a fleet. So if it's your, you would have capital expenses. If it is somebody else's that you have leased it, you would have to pay the lease amount, rent for those trucks. On top of that, you would have to pay wages to the driver. You would have to make sure that they are in good running conditions. The maintenance cost would also be a part of transportation, maintenance of the fleet, I mean, and transport insurance would also be a part of transportation cost. So all these components are a part of transportation cost. Now let's talk more about what is carrying cost or holding cost. Now, if I were to define it, I would say it's simply the amount of the value of the item it would cost me if I were to keep the item for a certain period of time in my warehouse where I'm holding it. It is mostly defined as the percentage of dollar value of inventory per unit of time. So if I am holding an item for a longer period of time, I would have more carrying cost on my head. Now let's also discuss what are the various components of the carrying cost. These components are used to calculate the percentage of the dollar value of the inventory that we just talked about. So these expenses could be in housing the inventory, such as the storage cost, which could be the rent that you're paying, the operating costs or the taxes, the material handling cost, if there is equipment, the lease payment for the equipments or the depreciation on them, the power that runs the facility, so the power costs. Some other components of carrying cost also include the insurance that you pay and the inventory value reductions or write-offs. So if you store somewhere, sometimes the inventory gets reduced in value or gets stolen. So that is also a component of carrying cost. One more component of carrying cost is called as the opportunity cost. So if you were to invest that amount somewhere else instead of purchasing inventory, you would earn some interest or money on top of your invested principal. So that is called as the opportunity cost. So some companies choose to include this component in their carrying cost percentage, and some do not. So just for the sake of understanding, let's assume you have inventory worth of $1,000 in your warehouse, and the cost of all the components that we discussed so far comes out to be 180. So that would be 180 divided by 1,000, which is 18%. So we would say the carrying cost for that particular item is 18%. This is a very simple and theoretical example. So some companies choose to do this exercise and some just adopt a number from their competitors or market leader. Calculation of carrying cost is a highly complicated exercise. But at the core of it, the carrying cost is simply the percentage of the dollar value of the inventory per unit of time. And this per unit of time is mostly 1 year. So if I were to hold an inventory for 1 year, how much is the percentage of the value of the inventory it would cost? That is the carrying cost. So those are the four components on the left, which I call the core costs. Now let's move on to understanding what are the components on the right. Now, what exactly is the landed cost? Landed cost includes the cost of the product plus logistics plus warehousing plus transportation and sometimes handling. Now, I know it's a little difficult to understand, but let's just say that you are purchasing an item, right? So you have paid the acquisition cost or the purchase cost. On top of that, you will require to spend some amount to get that item into facility, right? So the transportation cost and the handling cost to put it on a barge or to get it down, and then the insurance, customs, all these components would be part of landed cost. So connecting to the same example, it's not just the purchase cost, but getting that item to the facility would include all the components such as transportation, probably storing it somewhere, customs, insurance, and that is what is called as the landed cost. And the components of landed cost, as we already discussed, is the purchase cost, the cost of warehousing, the cost of transportation, such as customs, insurance. So I hope the concept of landed cost is a little bit clear with the help of example. Now let's also talk about the total cost of ownership or the life cycle cost of a particular asset. It is self-explanatory, but what are all the components of life cycle costs? So simply put, it would be either maintenance cost or responsible disposal of that particular item after the life cycle has ended. Now, if it breaks down a lot, then you would have a lot of maintenance cost and hence more total cost of ownership. So it is generally preferable that you buy a quality item, which would cost you a lot, as a higher purchasing cost. But at the end, when you aggregate everything, that is the total cost of ownership, it would come out to be less. So total cost of ownership is also used to compare between incremental cost of alternative supply chain solutions. Simply put, at the end of everything, how much is it going to cost me? The total cost of ownership also includes intangible costs. Now, intangible costs might be difficult to put into exact amount of money, but that practice is sometimes not considered good. It kind of gives executives a excuse to select what they want. So if one is going to include intangible costs, one has to make sure that they make sense. So the total cost of ownership or the life cycle cost is the cost accrued throughout the life cycle of the asset, including the disposal of that particular asset. All right, so that's all about the costs associated with inventory. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in comments, and we'll cover the inventory planning strategies in the next video. See you there.